Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's first meeting of the Joint Assembly Committee on Ways and Means, Senate Committee on Finance, Joint Subcommittees on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Senators Wynn.
Here.
Titus.
Here.
Taylor.
Present.
Assembly members Anderson.
Present.
Brown May.
Here.
Dickman.
Here.
Hibbets.
Here.
Mosca.
Here.
Chair Watts.
And I'm here. Thank you. We have all members present. We have a quorum. A few housekeeping notes before we get into our agenda today. Please remember to silence your cell phones. If you plan to speak, please sign in at the table and provide a business card if you have one. Whenever speaking on the record, please be sure to state and spell your name for the record anytime before you speak. Today, it seems that we're having some technical difficulties with the Southern Nevada Legislative Office, so you can follow our meetings online via YouTube or from the legislative website. If you would like to provide public comment today, we will have a public comment period at the end of today's meeting. You can call 888-475-4499. When prompted, provide the meeting ID 881-5336-6661 and then press the pound sign. We will be hearing 3 budgets from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, followed by 1 budget from the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency today. With that, we're going to get right into it. So I'd like to welcome Director Settlemyer and the DCNR team to the table.
Thank you, Chairman Watts. James Settlemyer, Director of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I have Heather Bugg, one of our ASOs, here to run the slideshow and try to make sure I don't forget anything. So with that, we'll go ahead and begin. As you know, the Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, we affectionately call it DCNR in the state of Nevada. This is our overview of our department, a little bit lower level than the previous one since you've already heard it. We consist of 8 divisions, 4 programs, 37 grant and loan programs, and the desire is to be at about 822 employees at the end of this budget. Within that, if you look at our department division position summary, as you can see, the only departments that are really growing by a large mass will actually be the director's office, and that's because we're trying to do an IT reorganization, bring everybody inside. We haven't had any additional IT to our departments for over 14 years, and well, there's a need. And also this will allow us the ability to manage those individuals. We'll go ahead to our department goals before we get to that though, which is of course to protect Nevada, manage and enhance its natural resources, cultural and recreational resources, improve our processes, modernizing them and streamlining the process to improve efficiencies, increase access and transparency, and improve customer service and eliminate backlogs. A lot of that is through digitization. That's why our IT reorg is so important to us. We want to also foster economic opportunities, managing and developing our natural, cultural, and recreational resources to responsibly increase those economic opportunities throughout the state of Nevada. And of course, facilitate the partnerships, as we discussed earlier, between the federal, state, local, and philanthropic entities to grow that capacity. We were very fortunate over the last couple of years to have several individuals step forth with rather large donations to like Valley of Fire State Park. And we have to try to reach out and find those individuals that might be willing to donate and get them to donate in Nevada rather than other places, in my opinion. And we're very successful in doing that through the kindness of some members of yourselves helping introduce us to those individuals, and we're going to continue that. To me, overall, it really comes down that we need to do our best to manage our natural resources for the benefit of the citizens of the state of Nevada, for the visitors to the state of Nevada, and to the businesses that are within here. And that, to me, is my main goal. Department challenges. It's great that we have a lot of new staff, but that takes a little bit of onboarding, training, and requires time and resources. As discussed earlier, we've had new employees within NDUP, and then Nevada Department of Environmental Protection. And within NDUP, these new employees have to get trained and federally certified. That means we have to send them to Ohio. That course is offered once a year. Then if that individual leaves the state, well, we have to wait another year. And so those situations are occurring and we just have to keep up with that. That continued turnover, though, of individuals, if they decide to leave the state service and usually go to county service or a municipal or private sector, creates us issues. There are some interesting opportunities of late. We are actually finding some federal employees that might be interested in working for us, feeling that we are more desirable. And I'm trying to take advantage of that at the best of our abilities. Emerging technologies, new and growing industries come and increase the demand on our services. And by that, there are such emerging technologies, whether it's advanced geothermal, advanced lithium extraction, things of that nature that we must actually research. We have industries that are cutting the edge on like battery recycling in the state of Nevada. Well, they barely know what they're doing, and we have to somehow regulate them. So we have to kind of catch up in some respects. So that's what I mean by emerging technologies. Limited resources, increasing demands with flat and declining funding, force difficult resource allocations and program implementations. As we all know, we're all dealing with limited resources, and we have to figure out where best to put those limited resources as they come up. Yet the demands continue. Over my tenure in your position and in this position, I've seen the federal government cut back on funds, no matter who's in charge. And that means the state, if we want those resources to be preserved, if we want to see those resources utilized for our constituents, we have a decision to make. Stand up or don't. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, which is the Director's Office 4150 account. Biennium budget, is very little of its general fund. It has 42 FTEs. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide deck. It talks about the Director's Office administration. We're seeking a new personnel technician, department-wide human resource support, paid through what we call DOCA, a Director's Office cost allocation system. We're seeking to transfer an administrative service officer. That officer is to provide management level support to Conserve Nevada program, provide department-wide bond program oversight, and grant program coordination. Adjustment to a transfer in E900. This will adjust the funding and transfer to administrative service officer from above and general fund management analyst to be part of the Director's Office cost allocation. We got this position in, it was working just for the Director's Office, and we found out the need for it across all other entities or all the other departments that we have. So we're just trying to allocate that out correctly. Increase in-state travel and registration. Add in-state travel and registration authority to meet the program's goals while ensuring compliance with the state and federal regulations. Computer replacement, following the SAM's protocol, i.e. the State Administrative Manual of things that date out, and so therefore we must replace them. So with that, though, we'll just keep going to the next slide deck, unless there's any questions. Director's Office Administration. What we're seeking to do here is a modification to the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources cost allocation system to pay for the accounts and provide for greater transparency, i.e. adding all the IT stuff. Currently, we had a lot of IT people that were working for other departments, but we're not necessarily getting billed for. And so we need to make sure that those smaller agencies that are using the resources in part of their budget understand that if they're going to put a demand or a strain on IT, they need to be kicking into that. And so that's what it is. With that, we'll go to the next slide deck. Dealing with the IT reorg, as we discussed. What we're seeking to do is to pool those resources, eliminate duplication, streamline the process, and allow for strategic resource allocation, resulting in cost savings and improved efficiency. The real issue we run into is that the current system we have, we're not giving people the credit, in my opinion. Well, it's not an opinion, that's just reality. That, in other words, when we have people that are in IT that are siloed in one department, they're actually supervising other individuals, but they're not getting credit for that supervision because it's not in the flow chart. And to me, that's wrong. If they're supervising people, they deserve that credit. And this new allocation system will help us with that and make sure that people are getting the appropriate credit. We're hoping that helps not lose them to outside sources so that they're actually being appreciated and treated correctly, thus allowing these career advancements and opportunities that are in the next deal. It also provides us with increased security management by centralizing IT in one area. They can learn from one another, help one another, and, well, when someone's not there, someone else is already cross-trained in order to help out. So with that, we'll go to the rest of that IT reorg. The consolidation of the IT positions transfers all current IT positions to the Director's Office from the 5 divisions. And that's why you see a large increase in the Director's Office number of FTEs. It's not that we're creating a whole bunch of FTEs necessarily. We're just transferring them from everywhere else and putting them within the Director's Office. We're reclassifying our 4 existing positions to support the new management structure. We are seeking new IT positions and GIS positions, a few, department-wide support for the Information Technology Network, Geographic Information System, and the help desk needs. And distribute the IT costs, again, through the DOCA system, the Director's cost allocation. With that, we'll go to the next slide deck. If you look at the Director's Office IT reorg, you can see the FTE transfers, the general fund. It shows the current funding structure where the few divisions pay for the information technology system, where with the DOCA system, they'll all now having to be paying into that, providing all divisions benefits from the support of these very few staff that we currently have. The structure currently does not allow the department to properly account for the services to the programs that are receiving them, and this will help correct that and make it more transparent. With the next slide deck, this slide reflects how each division will be charged, the proportionate share to the appropriate division, again, and the program. Federal funds will be maximized where available. One of the other entities that we have within us, we have some standalone programs that are part of the Director's Office, such as the Sagebrush Ecosystem Program. As many of you know, it's a collaborative, multidisciplinary program established to protect and enhance Nevada's sagebrush landscape. The program consists of the Sagebrush Ecosystem Technical Team and a governor-appointed Sagebrush Ecosystem Council. Within that, the program lives within budget account 4150 within the Director's Office, has a program manager, their salary, operating, travel, and contracts, and of course the meetings for the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council. As of late, they've had challenges, to say the least, with increased desires to protect the sagebrush ecosystem. It has required a couple more meetings. And it's rather sad they've had to do them virtually. A lot of times it is a lot better to have personal interaction as we're having here today. And so they'd like to have a little bit of an increase in order to help out with that. So within that, we get to what they're looking for as their budget enhancements. As I indicated, increased travel and operating authority for them. And also in order to go for their team to come to these meetings as well. And a replacement vehicle. They've been sadly suffering with everybody else's vehicles over the years, hand-me-downs, and hand-downs from DOT and public safety after a time. Well, they were given to us because they're already beyond their useful life, and now they're really beyond their useful life. So we're seeking one vehicle for the Sagebrush Ecosystem Technical Team. That would be like a 3/4 ton truck with a bed so they can carry all of their equipment and 4-door capacity so they can all go to meetings and try to, per se, carpool and not have separate vehicles that break down along the way. Within the next one-shot appropriations we're seeking is the concept of a newer website to enhance transparency for the constituents, industry, and the ranching proponents. It will also improve the usability for consumers and streamlines the paperwork process. Part of that is the database, which is next. This is for their debit and credit system, which will integrate the new website and provide real-time forward-facing information. A lot of times we've had concern from people within the sagebrush ecosystem sphere that they don't understand the credit and debit system. This will help allow everyone to real-time see it, be able to figure out what credits and debits might be potentially possible for a project in order for them to make better decisions and also to protect the natural resources. With that, we'll go to the next slide deck, which is budget account 4159, which it was 100% ARPA funded. What is left in that account is $638,000 for the rest of the administration of that program until it goes away. Within that, we then go to the Nevada Water Conservation Overview. These are projects that support and coordination. The staff coordinates with the federal and other funding partners to address critical health and safety, drinking water issues, water conservation, aging water infrastructure across the state of Nevada. To date, they've awarded 15 drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater project grants totaling $72.6 million. The groundwater retirement program was run through them as well. That was a concept of trying to retire some groundwater. So far, we've totaled $25 million, retiring 22,519 acre-feet of water in over-appropriated, over-pumped basins. Nevada Water Initiative supports with the collaboration with the Division of Water Resources, DRI as well. Desert Research Institute provides funding for the development of state and county water plans. We're trying to assist the counties in developing their water plans. It's kind of crazy that many of them did not have water plans for their county, especially the smaller ones. And it's time to try to step up and help them plan for the future. ARPA funding, we obligated the funding to carry forward the 24-25 biennium to continue the projects in the new biennium until those funds are gone. Within the Water Conservation Infrastructure Initiative, we are sunsetting the ARPA program clearly because it's going away. It becomes effective March 30th, 2027, and which will then eliminate the management analyst within that position. As mentioned earlier, we're seeking to transfer that officer with the budget account 4150 for management level support of the Conserve Nevada program and provide department-wide bond program oversight and grant program coordination. The rules of the federal government over the last 4 to 5 years have changed. They've become much more worried about arbitrage, which is important to do, and arbitrage is the concept of holding on the money and getting too much interest of it rather than its intended goal, which is to be used for a project. However, there are several rules that have to be followed, more than I want to think of and more than my accounting wants to go forth from college. That being said, they have to worry about that arbitrage, making sure all the funds are spent correctly within a 30 years. They have to spend 85%. But then there's another rule that got triggered. 150,000 has to be, you have to be below 150,000 in an account if the principal rate increases, and that's more complicated than I want to think about. So that's why we could definitely use this person to help us with that problem. Within that, we'll go to the next slide deck, which is the Conservation District Program. I served on the Conservation District for Carson Valley for 26 years, State Conservation Commission for 7 years, appointed by Governor Gwynn, which actually got me working this area a little bit. But with that, I have a large love affair for the Conservation District Program. They're 100% general funded. They currently have 4 FDEs, program manager plus 3 conservation district staff specialists that oversee 28 conservation districts throughout the state of Nevada. It's a great program. What we're seeking to do with them is increase their annual grants from $5,000 to $5,500 per district for the 28 districts, so that's only a $14,000 increase, but that money means a lot to these smaller districts. They're able to use it for match. There are some districts that are very small, and they actually, if we give them $5,000, sometimes we're lucky if they actually figure out how to spend the $5,000. Then we have other districts, such as the ones at Tahoe, Carson Valley Conservation District, and some of the larger ones, that literally take that $5,000, match it with other programs, almost 28, 30 to 50 to 1. One of the districts spends over $2 million a year. And these funds help them get things done. Asking for increased travel and training. We all know that travel costs have increased a little bit, and that's what this is seeking to do. Also for out-of-state travel for meetings such as the National Association of Conservation Districts and other training opportunities for conservation district staff. Also seeking some vehicles for them. They're in the same boat. I've been dealing with several vehicles. Due to how spread out they are across the entire state of Nevada, the one program person who currently is within Winnemucca at the office, then the other 3, which range from southern Nevada to Elko to northern Nevada, that's why they need 2 vehicles. One doesn't cut it when you got that many people spread out so far. So that's why it's seeking to, same type of thing, looking for about a 3/4 ton truck with bed capacity to haul equipment and 4 doors in order to get to meetings with several individuals. With that, that is basically our budget overview in a nutshell. As always, I stand for questions that I may not be able to answer, but I have many friends behind me that I can always phone.
All right. Thank you very much for that presentation, Director. We do have some questions. We will begin with Assemblymember Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. And I'm looking for a little bit of clarification with regard to the centralization of the IT department. As I look at the material, we can see that there's a significant recommendation here. Can you talk a little bit about if the centralization of the IT department is not approved, are the new positions still needed? And then if so, what budget account would they be located to?
Sure. With that, the desire, of course, of the IT is to bring everything a little bit more centralized as discussed. And again, it's not a large number of new positions. We're just trying to make sure that people get credit. And so in that respect, if this were not to occur, it creates a problem for supervision. I also question that people could actually on their own do like an MPT4 and end up coming to the state and saying that they're working out because they are supervising individuals. And right now they're not getting credit. And to me, that's wrong. So I hope that you guys will be able to do that as far as which budget accounts, the new positions, if we're approved and we didn't reorg, where they would live. I believe they'd live within the director's office, but I'll ask Ms. Bugg, since she is ASO and has far more knowledge on that than I.
For the record, Heather Bugg, for the department to get full use of those positions, they would most likely be in the director's office budget. This would allow for the funding to be appropriate and for all benefiting programs to be charged. One of the difficulties financially that you see with positions being embedded within certain divisions is certain programs are getting billed for services that are being rendered for another division. For example, NDEP, which is primarily funded with fees and with federal funding, if services are provided to a smaller program like Natural Heritage, which is they have general fund, they have an NDOT transfer and some other federal funding, those funding sources that should be appropriately charged for that time are not being billed currently. The other divisions, water and NDEP, which house most of those positions, are being charged for those services. So we can't properly account for those charges and bill those programs as the current structure remains.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate my colleague from the Assembly asking about the IT department, because I have a couple of questions about the reorg as well. So thank you for opening up that door, Assembly Member. Just discuss a little bit what do you hope to gain, right? What are the benefits of centralizing the IT services? You talked a little bit about it, but I want to hear specifically, because you're pulling in a lot of folks, right? So.
Thank you, Chair Senator Taylor. James Settlemeyer, Director, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The concept of pulling them all together in one place is allowing them to collaborate with one another. By having them all centralized within the DCNR building, the Richard Bryan building, and having them on one floor, gives the ability for them to work with one another so that they can learn from one another. And we've already seen some benefits because we have moved individuals closer to one another, and they're able to go, oh, no, there's an easier solution to that. Some people are very versed maybe in a particular program, whether, let's just say, Excel versus PowerPoint versus MS Word, and not everyone has great familiarity with everything. But by being close to one another, they can say, hey, how would you solve this? We've also seen, gains like that by putting more of our ASO together. They're able to say, oh, no, there's an easier way to do that spreadsheet. There's an easier way to look at this. And that's the type of gains we're seeking to have overall, but also the environment. Making sure, again, that people are being appropriately credited for the supervision that they're doing. We hope that that'll help us with turnover, because simply, some people get frustrated. Well, I know I'm supervising people, but here at this department, because we don't have the flow chart or because we don't have the IT consolidation, they may decide to leave in order to go somewhere else within the state or private sector because they don't feel appreciated. And I don't blame them. And this will help resolve that issue in my mind. But with that, is there anything else? Ms. Bugg?
Heather Bugg, for the record. One of the other benefits of centralizing IT is a lot of these positions are currently housed within a particular program. For example, with forestry, there's an IT professional 2 position that serves for forestry statewide. That's the main component of their duty. If we can centralize IT, that'll allow us to really look at where these positions are and what kind of service they can give out in the rural areas. For example, another agency that is spread out, similar to forestry, is state parks. If we can cross-train those technicians and have them well-trained for all of the systems that are running by those different divisions, then the manager is able to move those resources where appropriate. So when they're out in Winnemucca serving forestry, they can also look at state parks as a system, and that's where that cross-training comes in, is to have a fully focused IT section that is focused on a department level. There's also opportunities for putting in a governance structure. So when we go out to buy a certain piece of software, we're taking in all of the needs of our divisions instead of looking at one particular division and economizing that purchase and saying, okay, state lands is doing the same work as state parks or something like that. We can look at that buying power and going, okay, we can have one solution that meets the needs of both both divisions, and then we're making one purchase instead of siloed systems across the department, and actually making our resources more efficiently, both on staffing and purchases.
With that, Senator James Settlemeyer, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, we've seen benefits like this already. By talking with one another, Heritage Department was saying, well, why don't you just use NevChris to enter all this information, which is a program they use. And the other department goes, Nev what? And by having that exposure to one another and familiarity, they're able to do that. One of the main benefits I also see is by having the cross-training for our constituents, we won't have to sit there and go, I'm sorry, that system's down. That person who handles that will be back here on Thursday. And so if you could call back then, we might be able to get you an answer. And to me, that's not right. By having other individuals who are cross-trained, wait, someone else can step in. Maybe it's not quite as perfect as the other person did it, but they can get the systems up and running and help the process go along rather than having the proverbial, let's just put this on the shelf for 3 or 4 days and we'll get back to it when the other person gets back from whatever they had to do.
Thank you both so much. It's because that was deeper than through the presentation. And part of the questioning around this, from my standpoint, is we've had so many other presentations where people have asked to pull out IT and establish it for themselves. And this is just the opposite piece. I wanted to kind of get into your thinking about that. And I know that your plan is to bill then, so they all come in under the director's office, and then you're going to bill the agencies. How did you come up with that methodology, and how do we know that that's going to be the monies that's necessary to cover that the FTE?
Sure. This is James Settlemeyer, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Thank you, Chairman Taylor. To answer your question, we already have a director's office cost allocation system for the actual leasing space for the square footage of individuals within the building, because we get one bill overall that we have to pay to the state for lease of said building. Well, then we have to allocate that accordingly to all the various departments within the building based upon their square footage. So we already had a system called the Director's Office Cost Allocation. We were originally trying to think of different ways to allocate it. We came up with one thing, however, it was stated as, no, well, just use the system you have. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Just go down that road. And so that's what kind of led that, but I'll allow Ms. Bugg to further elaborate.
Heather Bugg, for the record. It is based off the Director's Office cost allocation, which has been an existing cost allocation method used. It is based on the number of permanent FTEs, so it is split amongst the divisions in that method.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence for a couple questions.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Assemblymember Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this important information. I'm going to move us over to the human resources position that you talked about. Can you talk about the current human resources personnel supporting the department and how this new position would benefit the agency?
Sure. I'm not sure if we have James Settlemeyer, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Currently, right now, we have an overall HR person, Genevieve Hudson, who serves for the department overall. Several of the departments are so large, they have their own HR people as well. What we're running into is that we could use a little bit more facilitation for our main HR person to better coordinate and have someone to help them reach out and work better with those other divisions that we have to make sure that we have all the same procedures. Sometimes we have certain HR people that think maybe that you should do it this way. However, that may not comport with what is supposed to be done for the state of Nevada. So in order to help streamline the process and make sure everything is done, and obviously we're in a little bit different culture nowadays where people sometimes don't tend to stay in jobs quite as long as they once did. And due to that, we're seeing an increased demand and need for HR, and also various factors that now happen with HR. Things you go back 10, 20 years ago within human resources, you did not think of these issues and concerns that we must be very cognizant of, responsive to, and it is the right thing to do and the legal thing to do. So we must be in compliance.
Follow-up, Chair? Go ahead. And thank you so much for that. And just to be clear, so with the new positions, it sounds like, would it just support the department-wide or only the smaller agencies? Would it be the whole department or just the smaller agencies or both?
Heather Bugg, for the record. It would primarily assist the current personnel officer and do the clerical level duties. It may end up as backup for the other division's service if there is a missing position, but it will primarily serve the accounts that the director's office currently serves HR and fiscal needs.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Senator Wynn.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. You had mentioned something about, just to simplify, that there's a lot of times around some of these federal procedures, there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through in order to get this. Has your office come up with any plans to address any cuts to some of these conservation and natural resource programs that are funded by these federal programs if the administration, goes through on its word to cut, the federal administration comes through and cuts a lot of these programs around water conservation, sagebrush programs, and other industries? I know that in talking with our fiscal staff that approximately 20% of your entire budget is federally funded. So as difficult it is to go after those matching dollars and to go through that, it is quite a bit of your budget. So I'm wondering what kind of plans you have in the event that those programming and that funding is cut off.
Thank you. James Settlemyer, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. As administrations change, this has been a continual issue no matter who's the president. The decrease in federal funds, but yet the increase in work is something I mentioned within the discussion is happening. Not just now, it's been happening for administration to administration. So I remember it was just under the previous administration, a situation where they reduced the state revolving fund. And the state revolving fund used to get like $200-300 million for water projects. However, they started to realize that they had to balance out what to do with their federal earmarks. And they thought the solution is, okay, great, we just take it out of this pot of money. Well, that reduced us from $226 million to $40 million. And then we had to figure out how to prioritize those water projects. So if something occurs, we're going to do what we've always done at the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, prioritize, figure out what the best need is and the best way to protect the natural resources for the citizens of the state of Nevada. Within the water realm, we tend to look at who has the biggest problem, because we do have some water systems in the state of Nevada that are almost third world standard. We've had a couple break that are getting water delivered to them by 5-gallon buckets. So we made them our priority at first. We had some that had nitrogen this last year. We made them the priority to get fixed. Regardless of population or location, they had the biggest problems. So again, if there are cuts from the federal government, we will take those into account, prioritize, and figure out what's the best thing to do for the state of Nevada, and of course work with our delegation and try to ensure that those cuts do not happen. And if they do, they happen in areas that are less painful for our constituents.
May I follow up, Chair? Go ahead. When you talk about those programs, do you have a current system internally to evaluate the cost-benefit analysis just internally on whether or not you want to even participate in these funds? I mean, you talked about how onerous it was to go through some of these things and balance in for your staff. Is there some sort of internal audit process that you guys go through as an agency and then as an agency head to figure out whether or not it's worth it to even participate in these programs?
Thank you, Senator. James Settlemyer, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Each one of the administrators oversees the programs that are within it. We look at the different grant programs that we have, and all through time, sometimes we look at things and realize that sometimes free money is not free. And due to the level of paperwork or the bureaucracy or the amount of match that is required, it becomes not advantageous to put forth for certain type of grants or certain grants that just, well, they're not Nevada. They may work great for certain areas of the United States, but they're not meant for Nevada. There are other ones that we've looked at that we've been working with our federal delegation to modify, such as lead drinking water. The current federal laws are more designed for the state of Michigan to try to help them with their lead problem, and it precludes us, and that is wrong. Because what it does is it allows water, fixing the lead pipes from the distribution point to the home. We have several water systems in Nevada that unfortunately have lead with them, that where the water is conveyed to that distribution point with lead pipes. Not complete lead pipes, but with pipes that may have had lead components. So we're trying to work on those to make them more advantageous. So we'll continue to work with our federal delegation on that in order to modify it. As far as a book system or an accounting system, I'm not aware of that. It comes down to the administrators looking at it and figuring out whether or not this is the right program for their particular division. We do work with the federal delegation to figure out which ones might be coming up or which ones might be going away, and this shift to other sources of funding in order to try to still achieve our goal.
May I ask another question? I'm sorry, Chair, if that's okay. You had talked about shifting monies and different priorities for different administrations. Obviously, with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there was hundreds of millions of dollars that came into our state, and there's even the potential for more. Obviously, there's some ideas that we would roll back, or the administration has talked about rolling back some of those bipartisan negotiations. And I know that, how does that work for your agency? Or do you have any input in on some of those other funds that you go after? I know that there was quite a bit of money that was about lead remediation money as a part of that Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. So obviously, it may not be a number one priority, and there are some things, but if there is opportunity and there is money to be able to make drinking water safe so we don't end up like a Michigan, or we don't end up like these states that have this contaminated water that's poisoning their communities. What kind of efforts are you utilizing within your agency to make sure that we are not missing out on those kind of funds?
I appreciate the question. Senator James Sotomayor, Director, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I forget my place. Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, can I go straight to the person, or should I go to you through you? Thank you. Sorry for forgetting that earlier. In that respect, a great question, and I appreciate it. It brings forth what I stated earlier. We're not eligible for most of those lead programs because the way the laws are written by the previous administrations. They were specifically done, in my opinion, to benefit certain states who the sponsors wrote the bill for. I know that's shocking, but in the aspect of the federal funds, again, we're going to do our best to work within that and figure out how to do it. I wish to modify the ones for lead in order to make it more available for the true needs of the state of Nevada, which is unique. We're not a traditional state in the way we grew. We didn't simply grow from a tiny place and evolve out that created the issue. We tended to always have a little bit more leapfrog, centralizing stuff and then putting lines to those particular housing tracts or subdivisions. And I'm appreciative of that because it tends to concentrate homes in certain areas and leave more of the rest of the landscape open for other purposes and utilization. I know within Carson Valley and several spots across the state where you decide to put the well is where the best water is. That may not be the best place to put a home.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir, for being here today. I have a comment and a question. Looking at page 18 on the groundwater right retirements, you retired, spent $25 million, 22,000 acre feet. Quick math calculation, that was $1,110 per acre feet that you retired. Actually, from what I can see, that's actually a pretty good deal. I mean, some of these acre feet in my neighborhood, if you're going to buy water, it could go for a lot more. So, good job on that. Can you tell us how many more folks would have retired their water rights had you had more money to do so?
Thank you for the question, Senator James Sotomayor, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I think it really comes to more of a question of, not really a question of money, but of time. Because of the limited funding we're working with in the ARA program, we had a deadline. So we had to have that money dedicated within a certain time frame, within a year, and spent within 3. Now, with a program where you're not actually doing physical projects, you're literally purchasing something and retiring it, that's almost the same time frame. Because once you have it dedicated, it's basically done. So in that respect, if we would have had more time and money, then there would have been the potential. As far as just the concept of more money at this point in time, I'm not sure that it would have made a gigantic difference. There could have been some more done. And I say that because we had some water systems we were very hopeful would have participated in this program. However, they really wanted the value of the water to exceed the value of the land. And we weren't going to do that. We're not going to pay you more for your water rights than we could have bought the ranch and the water rights together. So in that respect, I'm not sure necessarily a bunch of money in that time frame would have seen a gigantic change. However, if given a gigantic pot of money in unlimited time, that would be different.
Well, I just want to thank you for that. I just want to acknowledge that you did a good job with the amount of money and amount of time that you had, and to be able to secure that much water. Well done.
If I could, Senator James Sotomayor, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, a lot of this credit goes to the entities that worked with us. So Mr. Fontaine did a phenomenal job in helping to find individuals that are out there that are willing to retire. It was fascinating, the individuals that did come forth and retire. There were some of the oldest ranches in Nevada that stepped up and said, this well doesn't make any sense. What am I doing? You know, do I drill deeper? Even though I've had this property maybe for 100 years, it's time to think about this and go, this one particular well doesn't work. I need to concentrate on the more productive lands, and I need to quit trying to potentially farm lands that maybe generations ago they never should have started. And it was interesting to see the difference of individuals that step forward to that program. But a lot of that credit doesn't go to the DCNR. It goes to those individuals that were out there in the brush working with these individuals. And we had water right projects all across the state of Nevada. We were very fortunate, from Clark County to Smith Valley, where you live, within Lyon County rather, and all across the state, up where Pico Cachilla lives, in Diamond Valley, which is our most over-appropriated, over-pumped basin, to the point of 300% over-appropriated. And over-pumped, watching, sadly, farmers are trying to figure out what to do as they chase the straw down, and that's not a good thing. And luckily, we're able to help alleviate some of those problems. And I thank all of you for what you've done to try to help in those aspects.
Thank you. Keeping on the topic of the Water Conservation Initiative, it looks like in the materials in the slide that you went over with us that you've awarded and allocated all of those funds. I can tell that you're very aware of the deadlines, but can you just confirm for us that across all the areas, both the Groundwater Rights Retirement Program as well as the other infrastructure programs, that you feel confident all of the money will be expended by the required federal deadline?
James Settlemeyer, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Thank you, Chairman Watts, for that question. Yes, the $25 million for the water rights retirement purchases, we were very happy because it got it off our plate really quickly and got it done. As for the other 75, yes, we will meet all appropriate deadlines. We feel confident with that. We have the flexibility to try to help projects and get things done. That 75 will be expended in that time frame. We feel very confident with that, as long as there's not some gigantic thing that happens out there that we're not yet thinking of. I'll just leave that as a caveat. We have always had issues where all of a sudden we have a steel shortage or something that sometimes could throw us a kink, or some other catastrophe occurs. But we feel very confident at this point in time.
Thank you. And then saw that the management analyst position associated with this project is set to be eliminated March 31st, 2027. But we've seen in the actual budget itself that it was eliminated effective the end of February 2027. So can you just give us some clarity on what your plan is, and we can make sure that all the numbers line up?
Sure. This is James Settlemeyer, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I'll address this, and I'll allow Ms. Bugdick make sure I have it 100% correct. As you can tell, this was an ARA job that we are transferring to make him full-time. And I know, as you commented previously, that's traditionally not the desire to do. But it reminds me of my father. I sat there from 8 years old on a single rake, raking hay. And so finally at 18, my old man goes out and buys a double rake. And he's like, wow, we accomplished so much more. It's like, I've been telling you that since I was 8 years old. I had no idea what we didn't have. And so that's why the desire to keep this position, because it is become so important and so relevant. But as far as the aspect of the different dates, I'll ask Ms. Bugg if she can address that. Thank you, sir.
For the record, Heather Bugg, the management analyst position would be sunsetted at the end of March. This will facilitate all of the liquidation period of those funds.
Thank you for that. I believe we have a couple of additional questions. We'll go to Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So we've had the money from the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, and we've been able to use it for a few different positions, and I guess, can you justify the need to keep that existing administrative service officer that was initially funded by that, and, or will that be a sunsetted program since we will no longer be having that money coming in?
Thank you, James Settlemeyer, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Anderson. So that position currently, like I said, they're overseeing the ARPA distribution. However, the other position that's within there has a need to make sure that all of the programs, as I mentioned earlier, are complying with federal guidelines, arbitrage, and things of that nature. And this position will be able to help that person take over those tasks and make sure that we don't end up in any of those problems on those programs, and that's why it's so relevant. The bookkeeping is increased a little bit more than it once was, and it's important to follow all the protocols and deadlines and make sure that the state is not an arbitrage, because the last thing we would want to do is be responsible for our bond rating having an issue, and that's where this position really will help us out.
So thank you for that, especially based upon what I think my colleague from the Senate brought up when it comes to the federal grants and everything. So being aware of our bond rating is very important. So hopefully there'll be a way for us to be able to get that. But if you could clarify, because from what I understand on the ARPA coronavirus funds, we have to have them spent by a very specific date. And it looks like some of the money that is currently being considered will actually be possibly spent beyond that December 31st, 2026 date. Can you verify that those personnel costs can actually be used for that?
Sure. James Settlemeyer, Director of Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. All this, Ms. Bug, as always, correct me. But what occurs is the money was meant to be spent for projects by 2026. However, more time was allowed to ensure that the accounting of those funds were allowed to continue into 2027. Because simply put, you can't make sure somebody paid the bill or the invoice is sent until the product was actually billed out and invoiced. So that's why the ARPA was changed through time to allow for more time for the administrative costs to be handled. I'll see how close I was. She says I'm okay.
Thank you, Chair. So it's about the administrative costs. Thank you so much, Chair, for that time.
Thank you. And yes, I know that we've been having this conversation around positions funded with ARPA dollars. And so I'd just like to summarize and see if you kind of agree with the characterization. So in this case, this initiative was a one-time program set up that way. 2 positions, one is closing out, the other one is proposing to be moved over. And I think my understanding of it is you see the skills and you've got that person and you want to keep them on and meet some other needs in the agency. And so this proposal is really kind of a streamlining of what would otherwise have been a complete closeout of this program and a budget enhancement to meet some of the bond program needs. Is that a fair characterization?
Thank you, Chairman. James Settlemeyer, Director of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I appreciate your synopsis. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. I believe we'll go to Assemblymember Dickman next.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the question, and thanks for being here. Good to see you. Can we just go to the Conservation District grant increase? It looks like in 2020 they were reduced considerably, but then over the past few years they've been increased by $500 a year. Just wondering, and this is probably obvious, but how would the additional grant funding be utilized, the additional $500 by the districts?
Sure. James Settlemeyer, Director of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Thank you, Assemblywoman Dickman, for the question. Interesting, I actually printed out ahead of time my fiscal team did, the accounting for the conservation districts from 2000 to 2027. Back in 2000, they were $5,000. And over time, through budgetary crises, when I was here in 2009, I actually got a one-time increase. We actually gained them up to 10,000. However, that was just a momentary increase. Those conservation districts were able to do obviously a lot more work on the ground and get other programs using it as match money for federal funds or local funds to get more things done. Unfortunately, then in 2010, we got reduced to $4,200 a district. And then in 2011, through the economic downturn, it went down to $2,500 a district. Then we got it back up to $5,000 in 2015. We had another budgetary problem, so we went back to $3,500. And we've been trying to get back there to $5,000 ever since, which we finally did. Luckily, Governor Lombardo did that in the last budget. We're seeking to try to get them $500 more a district. How will that money be used by each individual district will be up to them. If they do not use it, then the money comes back into a pot, and then it's actually able for the other districts to try to seek that minor increase that they may not have utilized. And we do have some districts that have problems because, like I said, they're very, very small. But when you start looking at $5,000, and if they have to rent their space, or if they have a vehicle, or they have to buy some T-posts for a project, or maybe travel to a meeting or for a grant opportunity, it'll be very useful for them to have that tiny bit extra of cushion.
Thank you. I mean, it really isn't a lot of money, the entire grant, so probably won't be hard to spend an extra $500. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. One other question. As you know, there's been discussion around potential policy and additional funding for a soil health initiative that would be run through the conservation districts. I know that you're a big fan of them. Have you had any conversations with them and had any feedback on their interest or excitement in potentially having additional resources to do that work?
Thank you, Chair. James Sotomayor, Director, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The subject came up last session when the bill came up, and the concept of helping individuals provide for better soil health is the very essence of what conservation districts have done over time. They started out in, it was actually in 1937, my great uncle, Fred Sotomayor, founded the Carson Valley Conservation District, basically through the Dust Bowl, which had the premise of trying to preserve soil. They used to be called the Soil Conservation Service. For some reason, that necessarily didn't stick, so they wanted to go with conservation districts. That being said, if the funds go with the program, then it is of immense utilization. If it's just a program without funds, that's kind of problematic because they have a few other things on their plate at this point in time. So I guess that'll be up to you guys to determine how that goes.
Thank you for that. Next, I believe we have another question from Assemblymember Mosca.
Chair, I think it's on the next one.
Guess she has a question on the TRPA.
Yes. All right. Any other questions for DCNR? All right. Seeing none at this time, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you for your time.
And with that, we will move on to the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Good morning, everyone. Take your time. Just remember, once you're ready, to please state and spell your name for the record, and welcome to the committees.
Thank you. Good morning, Senate Chair Taylor and Assembly Chair Watts, committee members, and staff. For the record, my name is Julie Regans, last name spelled R-E-G-A-N, and I'm the Executive Director of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Joining me this morning are Devin Middlebrook, TRPA's Government Affairs Manager, and James Marino, the Interim District Manager of the Tahoe Transportation District. Thank you for inviting us to present our biennium budget request and share more about our agency's work to protect Lake Tahoe. I also want to thank Senators Taylor and Titus for their participation on the Interim Oversight Committee for TRPA and the Marlette Lake Water System back in 2024 last year. I'd also like to recognize Director James Sotomayor, from whom you just heard, who is a member of our governing board, as well as Shelley Aldine, who was here and will be back shortly. Hopefully, you have all had the pleasure of visiting Lake Tahoe. It is one of the largest, deepest, clearest, and most spectacular mountain lakes in the world. Tahoe has a unique history. Following the 1960 Winter Olympics at Palisades Ski Resort, Lake Tahoe was at a critical crossroads as rapid development threatened its future. Plans were developed for the region to grow the size of San Francisco, complete with a multi-lane freeway circling the basin and a bridge across the mouth of Emerald Bay, as you can see in this rendering, which we dug up in our archives from the time. Regulatory authority for the 500 square mile watershed was fractured, split between our two states, 5 counties, and a city. In response to the crisis and growing concerns, Lake Tahoe would be irreparably harmed. The two states decided to come together to create an agency to manage growth and development in the watershed and lead a shared cooperative mission to conserve and restore the lake and its unique environment. So in 1969, after both states passed identical, substantially similar pieces of legislation to establish us, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, with the consent of Congress, our bi-state compact was born. TRPA is the nation's first environmental organization with land use authority crossing state lines and continues to be unique in the United States. And this December, we celebrated our 55th anniversary. And today there is no bridge over the mouth of Emerald Bay, and instead of freeways, we now have the Tahoe Rim Trail, which sits at the top of the mountains ringing the lake. Tahoe is a conservation success story. Today, 90% of the Tahoe Basin's land is protected and in public ownership. The federal government is the largest landowner, just as in the state of Nevada, with about 80% of the land managed by the U.S. Forest Service. Additionally, the state of Nevada owns and manages some of Tahoe's most beautiful recreation and natural areas along Tahoe's east shore. The state of California owns a considerable amount of land, as well as some local jurisdictions. Over time, the percentage of private land ownership in the Tahoe Basin has significantly decreased as public agencies have acquired land for conservation and restoration purposes. And TRPA's strict growth management system caps the total amount of development that can happen on the remaining 10% of land that's privately owned. And just a few more slides of background before we get to the budget. The history of private development of Tahoe is illustrated on this chart. It's a super interesting chart. Even if you can't see the numbers, I'll try to track it here in the narrative. The majority of development occurred prior to the adoption of TRPA's first regional growth management system in '87, and that's the really large bar that you see in that period between 1970 and '87, almost 20,000 developed parcels. This system slowly, now going forward, meters out private development through development rights allocations. Additionally, state and federal governments have purchased and retired more than 9,000 private parcels in and amidst our communities. And this further reduces the total development potential of the region. So interestingly, if you look at that big slug of land development, 70s through 1987, and then if you go to the very bottom, you'll see since our regional plan update of 2012, we have the smallest amount of development at 1,400 units since 2013 to the present time. So when you take the history of public land ownership and private development, 98% of the Tahoe Basin is either protected or already developed. However, much of the past development in the region is still standing today and negatively contributes to Tahoe's environmental and economic health, including overgrown forest for wildfires, degraded meadows and streams that contribute to clarity loss of the lake, and aging recreation infrastructure that results in unsafe conditions and congestion on Tahoe's roadways. Our 2012 regional plan promotes environmentally beneficial redevelopment that removes development from the early years of Tahoe's growth, which is often located in sensitive environments, and directs it into our town centers to create more vibrant community spaces. Essentially, we're trying to transfer development in our town areas that are connected to transit and trails. So turning to keeping Tahoe blue. One of the leading indicators of the impacts to Tahoe's environment is the loss of its famed clarity. Historical records show that you could see more than 100 feet down into Lake Tahoe. But by the 1990s, Tahoe clarity loss meant that you could only see down into the early 60s, 60 feet.
The loss of clarity led to the creation of the Environmental Improvement Program, or EIP as we call it, in 1997 when President Bill Clinton visited Lake Tahoe and we had our first annual summit. More than 25 years later, the success of our restoration efforts can be seen in the stabilization of lake clarity loss. Projects to reduce stormwater from reaching Tahoe have made major clarity gains during the winter months when stormwater runoff is the primary loss of clarity. However, latest science shows the greater loss of clarity during the summer months, and this is an emerging area of concern where new actions are necessary. Our Environmental Improvement Program is led by our organization, TRPA, and is a collaboration of more than 80 public and private partners, including the state of Nevada. Together, we have implemented more than 800 projects since 1997 and that first summit. A couple of highlights are shown in this slide. More than 100,000 watercraft have been inspected to prevent the introduction of aquatic invasive species into Tahoe's clear waters. Nearly 100,000 acres of forest have been treated to reduce the risk of wildfire. Work we know was essential to aid firefighters during the 2021 Caldor fire, which burned into the Tahoe Basin. Inspectors have completed 85,000 defensible space inspections to ensure our communities are prepared for wildfire. And now I'm proud to say that we have 90 certified fire-adapted communities and many fire-wise communities showing that we all play a role in being prepared for wildfire. In addition, public agencies have added more than 3,000 feet of shoreline for public access so people can enjoy the beauty of Lake Tahoe. And finally, 1,100 acres of streams have been restored, which protect Tahoe's famed clarity, many on the east shore and the north shore on the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe. And then turning into our economy, we have a saying at Tahoe that our environment is the economy and the economy is the environment. Tahoe boasts a $5 billion annual economy, 60% of which is driven by outdoor recreation and tourism. Without a healthy lake, our economy and communities will deteriorate. The assessed property values in the region total $32 billion last year in 2024. That's assessed values, not market value, with Nevada's share at about $10 billion. Additionally, Tahoe's Environmental Improvement Program supports our restoration economy, which generates about 1,700 jobs per year, with a total of $5.2 billion in economic output since that first summit in 97. So we've made a lot of progress. In 2012, our regional plan had the organizing principle of striking a balance between the environment and economy by promoting environmentally beneficial redevelopment in our town centers. And this is accomplished through land use planning and incentives to remove old, outdated development and transfer that into our town centers. Since then, in 2012, we've approved more than 300 transfers of development. In turn, that has spurred more than $430 million in private investment in our economy. Over the next several years, major investments are being made on the Nevada side of the lake, including the remodel of the historic and nearly 100-year-old Calneva Hotel and Casino in Crystal Bay, and the proposed Barton Health Hospital project in South State Line, very close to our office on Kingsbury Grade on the South Shore. At Tahoe, private development directly funds environmental projects as well through the collection of mitigation fees, which are collected at TRPA, we hold in trust, and then return to local jurisdictions. From 2019 to 2024, TRPA collected more than $17 million in mitigation funds and distributed them to 63 EIP projects. So development is a public-private partnerships where at the time of a project, monies are collected and they go back to their local jurisdictions to fund public jurisdictions' investments in the environment. This shot of the Edgewood, beautiful facility there. I want to mention their new lodge, as shown on the slide. To build this project, the Edgewood expanded their stormwater treatment systems into the golf holes on the course to treat runoff from the broader State Line area and purchased an old raised motel, and they raised the motel in South Lake Tahoe to transfer the development rights. That motel site is now a public park in the city of South Lake Tahoe. So again, our goal is for redevelopment to support our lake and our economy at the same time. Looking at the strategic priorities at TRPA, in addition to our history and the core work, I just want to summarize a few key priorities that we have that our governing board has set for us. Our Tahoe Living Strategic Initiative is looking at ways that our agency can reduce barriers to developing affordable and workforce housing. Following the COVID pandemic and rise of remote working, Tahoe's housing prices increased while local wages have not kept pace. For many residents, the possibility of home ownership is out of reach. Next, our Restoration and Resilience Initiative, which is basically our environmental improvement program, is where we remain committed to our mission to protect Tahoe's and are building regional resilience to ensure the safety of our communities from extreme events such as catastrophic fire. And third, Keeping Tahoe Moving, which we discussed last Tuesday on Transportation Day here in the Capitol. That is addressing Tahoe's transportation challenges, including congestion at recreation sites, roadway safety, evacuation, and transportation options to our underserved communities. So looking at our budget, in account number 4204, our biennium funding request that supports the initiatives and priorities that I've covered and our amazing staff at TRPA is before you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting TRPA in the last biennium and restoring Nevada's budget to its historic 1/3 share with the 2/3 match of California. For the upcoming 26-27 fiscal years, we have maintained our budget request in line with the last biennium and no new enhancements. It includes, as baseline, the support for TRPA's general operations and staff salaries, moving TRPA's customer service into the 21st century by digitizing our hundreds of thousands of paper files, environmental monitoring programs, implementation of our aquatic invasive species program, and general fund support for the Tahoe Transportation District, who you'll hear from in just a moment. Finally, in line with past budgets, we're requesting parity with any staff salary increases given to state employees. This is equivalent to the language that was included in the 82nd session, AB 522, also known as the pay bill. The chart on the right is from our soon-to-be-published 2024 annual report and shows the variety of funding sources that support TRPA. The support from Nevada also helps us leverage local, state, and federal funding to maximize the return on Nevada's investment. So you can see all the other sources that the state contributions are contributing overall to the health of the basin. I will now pass this presentation to James Marino, the interim district manager of the Tahoe Transportation District, to share more about his agency, and then we'll wrap it up at the end and take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reagan. Good morning, Chair Taylor, Chair Watts. For the record, Jim Marino, that's M-A-R-I-N-O, Interim District Manager for the Tahoe Transportation District. I want to thank you for providing me the opportunity today to briefly explain who we are and what we do within Lake Tahoe Basin and the surrounding northern Nevada communities. The Tahoe Transportation District was created in 1980 by amendment of the Bi-State Compact, introducing Article 9, which grants the district the authority to facilitate and implement safe, environmentally positive multimodal transportation plans, programs, and projects for the basin, including operating public transit connecting to adjacent communities. In partnership with the TRPA, or Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, the district plans and implements a variety of transportation capital projects and programs, including public transit to portions of Washoe and Douglas counties with regional connections to Carson City, State Line, Nevada. Today, we are requesting a total of $693,000 for the biennium. I want to echo Ms. Reagan's comments and thank you all for supporting the district in the last biennium. The funding provides the district with the ability to coordinate with our partners in Washoe County, Douglas County, Carson City, Nevada Department of Transportation, DCNR, and others to unify approaches to transit capital delivery outside of grant-specific programs and funding that we receive. The district's primary function is to execute TRPA's current strategic priority of Keep Tahoe Moving through the Regional Transportation Program. Projects that promote safe, multimodal access to Nevada's outdoor recreation sites within State Route 28, State Route 431, and the US 50 corridors. Improving safety within these corridors is paramount to our district. As you can see from the photo in this slide, illegal roadside shoulder parking facilitates unsafe conditions for both Nevada residents and tourists alike. The district, in partnership with our local jurisdictions of NDOT, DCNR, and the U.S. Forest Service, among local jurisdictions, have several large-scale projects currently in design phase to relocate shoulder parking to new parking areas, provide crosswalks and safety infrastructure, provide off-highway trails and recreation access. In addition to our capital improvement program, the district currently provides local and regional public transit connecting commuters from Carson Valley, the communities of Minden and Gardnerville, to State Line, Nevada, and the California side of Lake Tahoe. This fixed route service provides an important workforce link between Tahoe's East Shore and its surrounding Nevada communities. All of the projects that the district plans, designs, and implements include a variety of improvements to further the environmental improvement program, making the projects as multi-benefit as possible. And finally, the district is funded primarily through federal, state, and local grant fund sources, specifically for projects and programs such as transit. These grants allow us to move transportation forward. However, the need for sustainable funding to support transportation as a whole in the Tahoe Basin remains a priority. With that, I'll turn this presentation back over to Ms. Reagan, and I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Again, Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director for the record. I'd like to thank this joint committee and the state of Nevada for your continued support of Lake Tahoe. It's my pleasure to lead TRPA in our mission to protect one of the most spectacular places on Earth. As you'll undoubtedly hear in public comment, there are many pressing concerns for our lake, and I wanted you to know that we all remain committed to working collaboratively to find solutions with our community. With that, I will turn it back to the chair for any questions, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We appreciate it. We do have some questions, and I believe now we'll go to Assemblymember Mosca.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate it, and thank you for this really helpful presentation. It was briefly mentioned on a slide and reading in my materials, but could you explain the potential impact of TRPA's operation if the transfer of the DMV revenue is not approved? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Assemblymember Mosca, for the question. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director, for the record. It's very important that we receive that DMV air quality funding. You know, several years ago, I've had the good fortune and the honor to be at the agency for more than 20 years, living through the recession and the deep cuts that everyone faced during the Great Recession of the state. And it took us over a decade to get back to our one-third share as the compact states of a two-third, one-third relationship with California. The DMV funds were an identified opportunity along that journey to try to get TRPA whole in its budget, and so we've come to rely on that for very critical air quality monitoring. We're about to release a report to our governing board at the end of February that gives a status of 140 different environmental standards, one of which is air quality. It's one of our 10 categories that we track, things like air quality, water quality, vegetation, et cetera. And air quality is a key indicator, and we rely on those funds to monitor the air. But I will give a spoiler alert, no surprise, but in the last 4 years, we have unprecedented levels of smoke impacting the Lake Tahoe Basin, not just from fires that have been inside the basin, but throughout the West and the states of California and Nevada. And so the air quality funds that we receive from DMV are critical to our mission and to allow us to monitor the health of the basin.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just to make sure that all the members of this committee are aware, we will also be looking at the DMV budget in the future, where we'll be digging into those issues a bit more. With that, we'll go to Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned the two-thirds, one-thirds, and working with California. Do you have any update on the status of TRPA's budget request to the state of California?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Senator Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director, for the record. Yes, we have made our request. The governor's budget in California has been published, and it does include the matching funds for the salary increases in the governor's budget. The legislature is in session in California as well. We will have a May revise expected from Governor Newsom around the middle of May, and then by the middle of June, that will be wrapped up. And so right now, we're positioned well to have the matching funds from California, and over the course of the last 15 years, while Nevada was getting up to the 1/3 share, California has maintained its 2/3 share over time.
Would we look at any adjustments then to the budget at all, depending on what readjustments, depending on what they provide, or is this what we're going to see?
Thank you for the question, Senator Julie Reagan, for the record. This is what we would see. We've already baked that into the request, assuming that we would have the support of California. And I do want to give a special thank you to Director James Seldemeyer, who's made some incredible collaborative outreach on the California side. Just a couple of weeks ago, we went to Sacramento to meet with his counterpart, Secretary Wade Crowfoot of the Natural Resources Agency, and it's also through Natural Resources in California that our budget flows. And so the communication between the two states has been very strong over the last few years to align so that we don't get out of sync again, and our goal is to keep that consistent going forward.
Thank you for that. May I follow, another question, if I might, Mr. Chair? Let's just a comment here, and then I have a question. Let's hope California's budget stays in the black, and they have money to donate to us, or contribute, I should say. On the other, you mentioned about the importance of the documents and digitalizing them, and you have a long history of a lot of papers in that building. I've been in your building. So could you give an update on the records digitization project, including the timeline for completion and some possibly additional funding that you might need?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Julie Reagan, the Executive Director of TRPA. You are correct. We have a file room with boxes piled to the ceiling, which is a fire hazard in and of its own right. So we've been steadily working on this for many, many years, but the funds that we received from the state of Nevada have really made some progress for us. So we've got about 18,266 project files scanned. Most recently, that equates to over 800,000 pages. And some of these are large plan sets in large format. We have 2 million files total, so we've got a long way to go. But we had started this before receiving these additional funds. The funds have allowed us to pick up a lot of steam and to do it much quicker, so we still have some work to do.
And just a follow-up with that, if I might. So I appreciate that, and again, I have seen the building, and I know but you are located in Nevada, and a lot of these projects, I just wonder, pretty consistently, though, the cost of all this is shared by California, including these kind of projects.
Absolutely, Senator. Thank you for the question. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. Yes, I mean, everything we do, you saw that graph of our budget, the power of the leveraging. We have funds from California that supports our general fund. We also have a lot of competitive grants at the federal level. We have local governments that are contributing. We have fees for service, and we strive to get cost recovery on project application fees, and that all comes together to support our overall budget. And yes, the state of California has been supporting our general fund prior to receiving these, and we've been scanning as we go. But it's a key point of public service for us to have access. We have something called a parcel tracker, so that anyone can go to laketahoeinfo.org, and you can click on the parcel tracker and put in your address or your parcel number and see if your parcel has a history of permits. And if you're one of the roughly 30,000 or I think 25,000 individual parcels that are in that database, you could be at your home, wherever it may be. It could be in Las Vegas. It could be in the Bay Area. The majority of property owners actually live elsewhere full-time. They're part-time residents, and now they have the ability to pull up that history of permits on their property. Our real estate community uses that parcel tracker extensively for real estate transactions. So it's been an incredible benefit, and we continue the commitment to grow that.
Thank you for all that, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions.
Thank you, and I'll just do a quick follow-up. So you mentioned It's a big project. We're making a lot of progress, and obviously we've got this proposal to help continue to move that forward over the next biennium. Do you think that this project is going to continue past the biennium and that there's going to be some additional resources needed in the future?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I'm going to invite Chad Cox, our Chief Financial Officer, to come up and just add to anything that I may have missed. But yes, I mean, we do have more than 1 million files left to scan, more than 1 million pages, and it will continue. Whether or not we come forward to request more funding support, I think, is a matter to be determined. But Chad is a new Chief Financial Officer. This is his first time addressing the committee. He was onboarded just less than a year ago. So I'll invite Chad to comment as well.
Great, thank you. Chad Cox, COX, for the record. Yeah, we're going to continue to work on the project. Currently, most of it's outsourced, so we have a third party that helps us contract that. I would say roughly of the $250,000 a year, roughly 200 is what we're using externally, and then we also have folks internally that help coordinate. Basically, we need to check the records to ensure that they're accurate before we destroy. So, yeah, we still have a long way to go. I anticipate we would request in the future biennium for continued enhancement, but we'll continue to see where we are 2 years from now. So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We will go on to Assemblymember Hibbets.
Thank you, Chair. In discussing your personnel issues, can you explain how the salary adjustment funds approved during the last session has impacted your recruitment efforts?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. The salary, the attention that we gave to salary and benefits that the last session allowed us to has been indispensable for us to maintain our current staff. Right now, we are fully staffed. A lot of agencies are sitting with large vacancies, and I'm very proud of the team that we have because, as we like to say, we're neither fish nor fowl. We're not a state agency. We're not a federal agency. We have this independent by-state compact, and that hurts us on recruitment in a number of ways. We're not in the PERS system, first of all, for retirement. We have our own retirement system. It's a defined contribution system, not a pension plan. So that already puts us at a disadvantage. Fortunately, we attract people from all around the country and the world that want to protect Lake Tahoe. So we have a mission-driven force. But at the end of the day, you can't pay a mortgage or rent on mission, so you need to have those competitive salaries. The contributions from the state of Nevada and now being matched in California have allowed us to provide salary increases and an increase in our retirement promotion, or our program for staff, so that the agency is now contributing about 15% to staff for the retirement. And also, we don't pay into Social Security because we're a government agency. So we have a lot of issues that we're trying to juggle with a very defined budget and a very constrained budget. So thank you all for making good on the Nevada 1/3 share. It's really helped our recruitment and retention immensely.
Are you hiring?
I actually just hired a new administrative staff member. For the record, if I may, Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I have been in the position for 2 years, and when I took the job, even though I'd worked with many of my colleagues for a very long time, I sat down with every one of our 76 staffers, and I interviewed them, and I wanted to hear their concerns. And where we've been able to identify some real pinch points in our enforcement and legal staff, for example, and our administrative staff, we've been able to pick up a couple positions over the last 2 years. And the support from Nevada allowed that to happen. So we're fully staffed, but we'll keep everyone posted as positions become available.
Thank you. And remember, Assemblymember, you do have a job for the next 4 months, regardless of the compensation. So,
Or lack thereof.
we'll go on to Senator Wynn.
Thank you. 2 presentations in less than a week. Thank you guys for this presentation regarding your budget and some of the requests. This kind of touches on some of the questions that Assemblymember Hibbets and Senator Titus had asked previously. I know that with this and this, where California and Nevada kind of share these costs, obviously proportionate to, I guess, our state and our budget. And we're waiting on some of that approval from June. Well, I think they finalized their budget in around June. So we have to kind of guess, I guess, and hope that it remains in there. But I see that there is an increase in requesting the Nevada fund of 77.9% of the salary increases. And I'm just curious on what that is when the bi-state compact funding ratio for our state is actually 33.3%. So where can you kind of explain to me why there's such a significant increase in those salaries given the proportion of income? It looks like we're phoning a friend here.
Yes,
so.
phoning a friend, calling for help. Thank you, Senator Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I'm going to invite Chad Cox, our Chief Financial Officer, to come up and talk. I will address the first part of your question, if I may, Mr. Chair. One thing to note with the California budget, we are largely in what's called the Environmental License Plate Grant Fund. So any of the specialty license plates that you see in California, you know, there's a Tahoe plate, but there's also the Oceans plate. There are new sports teams plates. That fund has been growing in recent years, and we often can weather some of their general fund storms by being in that fund. So once our budget is intact in the governor's budget, history would show we have high probability that we'll see that money. So that's the first part of your question, and then I'll invite Chad to address the second part.
So I'll try to make it simple. Oh, sorry, Chad Cox, for the record. Try to make it simple. What we were requesting with the salary raises was just to be in line with what the states had done for their employees. The state of California didn't have the same level of raises that the state of Nevada had over the last couple of years. They've averaged 3%, whereas in the last biennium, the state of Nevada, I believe, had 12 or 13% for each of those years. So that's how that ratio got out of whack. So state of California has provided their 3% commensurate with what they've paid their employees, and the state of Nevada has provided in line with what state employees received.
Chair, may I follow up? Yes. I guess I'm curious, and you had mentioned this when Assemblymember Hibbets had talked to you about how the increases for state employees, that ultimately you also received some of those commensurate salary increases. But, going back and talking with our fiscal staff, we've never seen a thing where we've approved funding for salary increases for the TRPA staff without equivalent salary increases for the executive branch of the state of Nevada. And so I see that there is an intent, it sounds like there's an intent to have those requested salary increases, but the executive branch in this budget, in this biennium, is not recommending those same salary increases across the executive branch. So is it your intent to give those increases to TRPA folks, and even though that our request, even though the executive branch is not doing this across the board?
Senator, you might need to help me to understand your question, but again, Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director.
And no need to apologize, because I was rambling around in my thoughts there. So if I need to clarify again, that's fine.
I think I understood, and you can help me if we need to probe further. Our intent really is to baseline the salary piece of Nevada's contribution so that we automatically just tier to whatever state employees get within the DCNR family, that would tier to our budget, and we're doing the same in California. We sometimes have to put in enhancements or budget change proposals in California just to get cost of living adjustments. And some years that just didn't happen over the course of many decades. And so historically, our salaries got very low and we were not competitive. And so what we've been working toward in both states, and it's very complicated, as you rightly point out, with the 2/3, 1/3 split, how that works is just that we tier to whatever the Nevada state employees that we would get in terms of the overall contribution, and the same in California. And then the budget staff here and at our team work the magic to make the numbers bear out to that 1/3, 2/3 share. But Chad, please feel free to rescue me if I got that wrong.
think you got it.
I thank you for that clarification. It kind of sounds like you took a model that was kind of hybrided to address both California's budgeting process as well as Nevada's budgeting process. So really it would be your request to receive funding raises only if a similar increase is
That's correct.
legislatively approved for the executive branch. So this is in line with maybe what we previously had done in the last biennium, but not necessarily going forward. So if there aren't those, 12, 13, 17% raises going in this biennium, which they're not proposed, it wouldn't be expected that you would expect those same things here.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, great clarification. That's right. We would just like to tier to whatever the appropriate DCNR staff would get on a going forward basis.
Okay.
Thank you, and I will go to you, Senator Titus, but I think one of the things that's also just worth noting for members of the committee is that TRPA develops their own budget and then submits it. And so it's, for lack of a better term, a bit of a placeholder, and then gets kind of adjusted based on where the rest of the executive budget is. And so it sounds like we're all on the same page, which is that there was a placeholder for that salary increase, but ultimately your intent is to follow whatever the rest of the state of Nevada employees get in your request.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Titus.
Thank you for the extra question, Mr. Chair, and thank you for same idea about the salary payment. You have 70. How many employees for clarification?
76.
76, and so looking at those, what would you say is the percent of those 76 employees that live in California versus live in Nevada?
Thank you, Senator Titus, for the question. Julie Reagan, TRP's Executive Director. I'm going to turn it over to Chad, who may have the numbers, or Devin has the numbers. I will say the majority of our staff live in the Basin. Some of our staff live here in Carson City or in the Carson Valley. Devin Middlebrook has the exact number.
Devin Middlebrook, TRPA for the record, MIDDLEBROOK. 60% of our current staff live in California, 40% in Nevada.
So, and thank you for that, because we always talk about cost of living, housing costing, and one of the things across the basin and Tahoe Basin, but it's not just in Tahoe Basin, it's in the Carson Valley also, not uncommonly the folks that work there can't afford to live there. So I was just curious if you see it's cheaper to live actually in California for your employees versus living in Nevada, just with your members.
Devin Middlebrook, again, for the record. There are a lot of factors that go into where folks live. Some of our employees live in the Carson Valley and Minden area because they want more land and more space because they like to raise chickens and goats. On the California side, there's more housing supply. There's just simply more houses on the California side, which make it easier to find a place. So there's many personal and economic factors that go into where people live.
And if I may add to that, Senator Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director, for the record, just as you well know, in the last decade, housing prices have tripled. We had the Zoom town, boom town during the pandemic, and we were not inexpensive before the pandemic, but we like to say we went to bed as Tahoe before COVID, we woke up as Aspen. And that is a big change, and it is a struggle for our working members of our community. Tahoe is a service-based economy. We have people that work in restaurants, that clean the hotel rooms. It is very difficult for the working members of our community, which are greatest in numbers in the full-time residents, to maintain an area to live. More than half, and depending on where you are on the North Shore, it's probably almost 2/3 of the workforce commutes in now because of this dynamic. So you're pointing out something that's a very big focus for our governing board with our housing initiative. We're trying to bring down the cost of housing in whatever way we can as an agency. There's a lot of factors, as Devin Middlebrook said. But from a talent retention and recruitment standpoint, it's very difficult for us also to recruit new staff that are moving from other places around the country. It's a real challenge.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the additional question.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions for TRPA? Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you. It's actually not for TRPA. It's actually for Director Marino for the transportation. Sorry about that. So I love going up to Tahoe over the summer as well as over the winter. And I hate it in the month of August because there's other people that are around there. Let's just admit it. There's so many people, it's crazy. With the transportation issue, I know around the lake that there's been an increase of trying to stop people from parking in the middle of that area. Could you possibly discuss that and what other plans are in place to help with that very large issue that actually happens all year?
Yes, thank you for your question, Assembly Member. For the record, Jim Marino, Interim District Manager, Tahoe Transportation District. The district is the lead agency in cooperation with multiple partners, our local jurisdictions in Nevada, plus NDOT, DCNR, U.S. Forest Service, on creating several projects along the SR 28, State Route 28 corridor. That's between Incline Village and Spooner Summit, Highway 50 intersection. Starting from the Incline Village proximity, we are increasing the Tunnel Creek parking, so that will provide more parking for access to the East Shore Trail, which is actually on the screen right there. Moving up the corridor, and we're going to continue the East Shore Trail from Sand Harbor State Park up to Thunderbird Cove. That is approximately a $40 million project for almost 2 miles of trail, plus scenic vistas along the highway, pullouts, and other safety mechanisms along the highway. We have received significant federal funding for that project, $24 million in raised funding from the previous administration, plus several congressionally directed spending earmarks for that project. We're well underway on design, and we hope to begin construction on that project in sometime fiscal year 27. Moving up the corridor even more to the center of the corridor, we have the Secret Harbor / Chimney Beach area, and this is a very popular area. There's an existing 35-spot parking lot called Chimney Beach, very tight, very small parking area off the highway. Our proposed project is to expand that to 120 spaces, relocate the parking that occurs on the highway, in other words, make the parking illegal on the shoulders of the highway, and move those people to a safe environment. Okay, that project also includes a multi-use pedestrian trail that would then connect to Sand Harbor's project, so we would have continuous trail going down the corridor. Right. In addition to that, the U.S. Forest Service has just completed a project called the Chimney Beach Parking Expansion, which is pretty much right across the street from Secret Harbor. That previous parking lot was nothing more than a dirt parking lot on the uphill side of the highway. That is now a permanent 130-space parking lot. We are, TTD, or the district, is creating a pedestrian crosswalk, activated pedestrian crosswalk with advanced warning on the highway so people can get from that Chimney Beach parking lot to the Secret Harbor side safely across the highway. That's one of our projects that we're initiating. And then finally at the top of the corridor at Spooner Summit, TTD is in partnership with the Nevada Department of Transportation to deliver a transit park and ride project of 250 parking spaces, plus a permanent aquatic invasive species facility to supplement TRPA's EIP program. And that park and ride will also serve as a mobility hub, so that when we run future transit, is what our plan is, up the Highway 50 corridor from Carson City, we will now have a connection point to the Highway 28 corridor. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you. Much more in depth than what I anticipated. Whoa. So thank you so much. My only concern would be that we would lose any more of the forest, but it doesn't sound like we are. This is already areas that had already been cleared out. We are not losing any more of our beautiful forest areas to create parking lots. That would be a very concerning thing. But thank you, Chair, for that much time.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you all very much.
That concludes our budget presentations for the day. So we have one last item on our agenda, which is public comment. If there's anyone who would like to provide public comment here in Carson City, please do come forward. We do not have anyone in Las Vegas due to technical difficulties, so if anyone is watching this meeting remotely, now is the time to call in, and again, you can find the call-in information on our agenda. With that, we'll go to our public comment here in Carson City. Go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Ellie Waller, W-A-L-L-E-R, Douglas County resident. During the course of the Legislative Committee for the Review and Oversight of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, the committee received testimony by the public at all the meetings and input from other stakeholders that indicated the need for updates regarding the status of various environmental standards utilized by the agency. Land development is inevitable action. Increase in buildings, after all, have become synonymous with jobs and commerce, but such growth comes at what cost? Suburban and commercial vertical sprawl in the Tahoe Basin, with over-tourism, precarious water resources for wildfire response, habitat loss, evacuation uncertainty, but ignoring carrying capacity issues. At the final meeting of that committee, they voted unanimously to send a letter to TRPA requesting that at the start of the 2025 legislative session, the agency provide the committee with the status of the update of the environmental thresholds. In our opinion, TRPA's 9-page response letter didn't provide an implementation plan, but punted by stating we will be prepared to report to that committee during the 25-26 committee. We, the locals, are not against tourism, visitors, or development, but TRPA has greatly prioritized unsustainable development and recreation far and above without recognition of social sustainability or downstream environmental impacts. We would instead like to see investment and improvements in existing infrastructure, redevelopment by removing blight and arrested decay, sustainability of current recreational access, not increasing access with new parking lots, approximately 500 have been mentioned, and public safety throughout a evacuation planning. Lastly, Ms. Reagan mentioned the Barton Hospital based on public comment. Not everybody on the South Shore is as excited, but looking forward to unbiased environmental analysis without a predetermined outcome. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no one else coming forward to provide comment here in Carson City, AVH, do we have anyone wishing to provide public comment remotely?
To provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please state and spell your name for the record, and you may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Noah Banayan. That's Banayan, and I'm the Government Affairs Manager at the League to Save Lake Tahoe, which you might know by the League or Keep Tahoe Blue. Welcome to the new committee members, and thank you to returning members. Thank you, Chair. I and our team look forward to meeting with each of you over the course of this 83rd session to discuss our partnership with the state of Nevada and our shared goals of protecting the lake. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today to affirm TRPA's Director Julie Reagan's request for funding from the state and our support in implementing that funding towards the betterment of the entire basin. Additionally, we echo Director Settlemeyer's funding request for the Nevada Division of Conservation and Natural Resources and Director Jim Marino's request for the Tahoe Transportation District. The DCNR serves as a vital partner in maintaining and improving Lake Tahoe's clarity and accessibility as a natural resource for all Nevadans to enjoy. PTD offers essential transportation services that keep our community moving and connected to schools, workplaces, businesses, and more. The League was founded in 1957 to slow the rampant development that was causing our lake's famed clarity to decline. We are the oldest and largest environmental organization at the lake. One of the league's early accomplishments was the creation of a unique bi-state regulator charged with protecting the lake and ensuring consistent environmental protection throughout the basin. This became the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. One of the things we continue to do is work with, support, and encourage our partners at the TRPA in fulfilling their mandates and using their unique authority to help protect the lake's environment. Development pressures, the housing shortage, and increased impacts from visitors are just some of the external pressures facing the lake. We are focused on finding solutions. This includes identifying and advocating for new and continued sources of funding, overcoming hurdles to implementation, and providing constructive input on plans and policies that TRPA develops. Many of the solutions TRPA, the League, TTD, and other partners are pursuing, like microtransit, are vital to protecting the lake. No one benefits if TRPA is not an effective, functioning, funded agency. We need them for the basin. The lake cannot be protected without TRPA supported to meet their mandate to achieve and maintain Tahoe's environmental standards or thresholds and implement their regional land use and transportation plans. Support from these committees and the state of Nevada are critical to carrying out the mission that spurred the creation of TRPA, a sustainable future for a clear and healthy Lake Tahoe basin. We look forward to working with these committees on this mission, and thank you again for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. AVH, next caller, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Elizabeth Bernhardt, Zephyr Cove. As a year-round resident of Zephyr Cove and the East Shore, I would like to have the following statement to contribute to this. That recent wildfires in California have demonstrated that both officials and the public are dangerously unprepared for large-scale evacuation. The Caldor and Tamarack fires made it clear that our current infrastructure at the lake cannot support the millions of visitors who would need to evacuate in such an emergency. A key contributor to this crisis is the policy of TRPA prohibiting road widening or creating new roads, which has severely limited evacuation capacity. The study conducted, a private study conducted by Tahoe Clean Air, shows an emergency evacuation simulation, and it predicts up to 13 hours of evacuation time on the west and north shores. Compare this to 5 hours on the east shore. It's a stark contrast. The difference is that there's a 4-lane section of Highway 50, which, despite serving a much larger population, including South Lake Tahoe, allows for significantly faster evacuation. We have seen that during the Caldor fire. Increasing housing density while failing to provide proper evacuation infrastructure and transportation is a recipe for disaster. So I don't understand why TRPA continues to push this. And no, bike lanes are not a means of evacuation. Thank you. Despite the millions spent in the past 35 years in state and federal funds received by the Tahoe Municipal Planning Agency and TTD, there still is no bus connection between Incline and South Lake Tahoe, or for that matter, between the north and the south of the lake. Just last fall, El Dorado County and the city of South Lake Tahoe founded a transportation JPA out of frustration over the lack of progress of planning for public transportation. Yet, TRPA and their subsidiary tells us it's because there's not enough funding. Scott Robbins, if I might quote him, a city council member, stated that the estimated funds for Tahoe were over 2.5 times higher than a similar project at Mammoth Mountain.
And if you could begin to wrap up your comments, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I urge you to say no to reckless planning, no to underfunded evacuation infrastructure, and no to additional taxes without public consent. Our community safety must come first. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your comments. AVH, next caller, please.
I am Rhonda Tyser, RONDATYCER. Like other long-term Incline Village, Nevada residents, I heartily support funding for TRPA and TTD. We local Nevada residents are concerned that TRPA's basin mission has been hijacked by the California legislature's affordable housing rules. TRPA says it must make regulations that allow the 2 California counties at the lake and the city of South Lake Tahoe to abide by California housing laws. Then TRPA says it must unify its code around the basin. So TRPA applies California regulations to the 3 Nevada counties as well. We Nevada residents at the lake now live under California housing and transportation laws, which include SB 375, promoting denser housing near transportation hubs, SB 35, establishing marina numbers whereby cities and counties lose grant money and are fined if they don't build enough affordable housing units each year. SB 9 Act allows 4 homes on a single family lot, and SB 10 allowing up to 2 accessory dwelling units on each parcel. And most importantly, SB 10 allows the state of California to override local Nevada initiatives restricting zoning. These laws require us in Incline Village to make a dense town center that will complicate early fire evacuation. And these laws allow 65-foot tall multi-unit buildings that are completely out of keeping with our rural village nature. We ask our Nevada Congress people to please stop TRPA from applying California legislative dictates on the Nevada side of the lake. Our village should not be controlled by California laws, even if 60% of TRPA staff live in California and only 40% in Nevada. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you for your comments. AVH, next caller, please.
If you've recently joined the call and would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good morning. Happy Tune In Tuesday. Could you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, sir. Good morning, Chair and all of the members. My name is Dora Martinez, and I just want to thank the people at Lake Tahoe for keeping it clean and having accessible recreation trails for people who are wheelchair users. And just a reminder, please, when you go to these places, bring your own poop bag for your dog, your pets, and your own trash bag so you can pick up after yourself. And if you run into something, a can of something or a paper bag, pick it up and put it in that trash bag that you have. That's what I do, and I'm totally blind. So if a blind person can do it, everybody who's sighted can see something wrong and litter and pick it up. If we do little things, we'll have a beautiful Lake Tahoe for our grandkids to see in the future. Thank you, sir. Have a Tune In Tuesday. Bye.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for the very valuable advice. I encourage everyone to leave the land better than you find it and bring a trash bag. AVH, next caller, please.
Yes, Melissa Soderston, Lake Tahoe. I would just like to say that the comments from Julie Reagan, the director of the TRPA, are incredibly disturbing. She is not a scientist. She is not an engineer. She is not a planner. She is a PR representative for what seems to be development these days. To say that meadows, which are actually the filter for our lake, the lungs of our lake, are degrading our lake is incredibly egregious. To say that logging is going to save us is also incredibly egregious. I do invite all of you to come up and walk through our forests here to see the degradation that the TRPA is allowing to go on. The other day, we had an atmospheric river in town, flooding everywhere, incredibly soft soils, and yet there was still logging going on. At what point of the year do our animals, our wildlife, get a break from the chainsaws and just the destruction? We need less development. These meadows never should have been built on in the first place. TRPA continues to act like they are the problem. What is happening here is that the increased logging is actually causing an incredible amount of sediment into our watershed. These meadows are the filter for our lake. The meadows are designed to trap and filter the sediment, prevent it from reaching the lake. As we build and develop and degrade and put trails, walkways through these meadows, all we are doing is increasing sediment. The more logging, all we are doing is increasing sediment. And the sad part is that the logging is doing nothing to protect our life and property during a wind and climate-driven fire event. There are so many trees in town that need to be cleared. People cannot afford thousands of dollars to remove trees from their yard. They cannot afford the defensible space work. They cannot afford to replace their wood shingle roofing. What we need to do is take this funding and direct it towards home and infrastructure hardening. We need buried utilities, metal roofing, home out defensible space, proper evacuation routes. We do not need more capitulation to development and the logging industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And can you spell your last name for the record again, please? All right. I think
Sorry, Chair. She disconnected.
That's all right. AVH, do we have any other callers?
The public line is open and working, but there are no additional callers at this time.
Thank you very much. That concludes our meeting for today. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. This meeting is adjourned.